discretion advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
On the 20th of May, 1998, 15-year-old Kip Kinkel, who was known as Kip, was caught with a gun in his locker at school. One of his friends had recently stolen the .32 caliber pistol and sold it to Kip for $110 in cash. After the pistol's owner learned that the weapon had been stolen, he immediately suspected the culprit was one of his teenage son's friends. When he reported the theft to the cops, he gave them a list of names of teenagers who he suspected could be involved. Kip's name was not on the list, but when school officials became aware of the incident, they suspected him anyway. While Kip was being questioned, he made no effort to hide that he had purchased the stolen weapon, saying, quote, "Look, I'm going to be square with you guys. The gun is in my locker." Sure enough, the gun was found in Kip's locker, and it was loaded. Both Kip and the friend who had stolen the gun were arrested, and the school suspended Kip, intending on expelling him after a hearing. After he was arrested and in custody, Kip's father came to pick him up and spent the drive home threatening to send his son to military school. Later, Kip would claim that he hadn't heard a word his father said because the voices in his head were too loud. After arriving home, Kip went up to his bedroom and grabbed his own gun, a semi-automatic rifle that his dad had given him. From an early age, Kip had been fascinated by guns and explosive devices, even creating homemade bombs as a young teenager. His parents had initially been concerned, but while his mother continued disapproving of Kip's interest in weapons, his father eventually decided that guns could be a good way for him to bond with his son. He ended up giving Kip several firearms, including a rifle that his own father had once given him, and then making Kip attend gun safety classes. Once Kip had his rifle, he snuck into his parents' room where the ammunition was kept. Then he walked into the kitchen and shot his dad in the head. His mother was still out of the house, so Kip moved his father's body into the bathroom, laying a bedsheet over him. 3.5 hours later, his mom got home. He walked into the garage to greet her, telling her, "I love you," before shooting her 6 times in the head, face, and chest. Just like he had done after shooting his father, he placed a sheet over her body. The next morning, Kip listened to one opera recording over and over again, setting his CD player to repeat the track. He wrote a note explaining the murders of his parents, saying, quote, "I just got 2 felonies on my record. My parents can't take that. It would destroy them. The embarrassment would be too much for them. They couldn't live with themselves." But right after claiming he'd killed his parents to save them from embarrassment, he wrote about the voices inside of his head, claiming that he had to kill people. He didn't know why, and he didn't have another choice. After leaving the note on the coffee table, Kip drove to the school in his mother's car. He was dressed in a trench coat, which held a total of 3 firearms, 2 knives, and more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition. He parked a couple blocks away and then ran onto the school's campus, where he immediately opened fire with his rifle, wounding 2 students before walking to the cafeteria. One of the victims survived the injuries, but the other, 16-year-old Ben Walker, later died in the hospital. Inside the cafeteria, Kip fired 48 more times, wounding 25 students. One student, 17-year-old named Michael Nicholson, died from his wounds shortly after. With his rifle now empty, Kip had to pause his attack to reload. One of the students who had just been shot, Jacob Riker, saw an opportunity to overpower Kip and tackled him while he was distracted. Kip managed to draw another gun and shoot Jacob another time, but along with several others, Jacob managed to hold Kip down. While he was being restrained by a small crowd of high schoolers, Kip repeatedly yelled, "Just kill me." Instead, the group held Kip in place until the police arrived. Shortly after being placed in police custody, Kip managed to grab onto one of his hunting knives and attempted to stab one of the officers, hoping that he could commit suicide by cop. Later, he claimed that he wanted to end his own life shortly after murdering his parents, but he had lost his nerve and had not followed through. Instead of giving in to Kip's request to be shot, the officer used pepper spray on him. Kip's attempt at his own life continued in jail, where he tried to starve himself to death. How well do you focus? When you have a task to complete, do you fidget, space out, or procrastinate? If you're like me, that's just a normal part of life. I had kind of gotten used to it until I found this magic shot that improved my life so much from day to day. Creating content requires creative thinking, and that's not easy with morning brain fog. Since I started drinking a little shot of Magic Mind to start my day, that fog isn't a problem because it no longer exists. I used to have multiple cups of coffee, an energy drink, a soda, anything to give me that morning pep. Now I drink a Magic Mind shot in the morning along with a cup of coffee, and I'm great for the whole day. It helps me focus and be more productive than ever before, and it feels effortless. Stress and anxiety, never heard of her. There are so many ingredients in such a small little shot of Magic Mind that helps with a variety of things. You've heard me talk about the brain fog, focus, and sustained energy, but Magic Mind also contains adaptogens that boost your mood and helps keep you relaxed. But Joe, I already take ashwagandha for that. Yeah, okay, that's good, but Magic Mind also has that, along with lion's mane mushrooms and cordyceps mushrooms that not only help reduce stress and anxiety, but inflammation, mental clarity, and ramps up your ATP in your mitochondria, which we all know from science and school is the powerhouse of the cell. I've been sharing Magic Mind with some of my friends and family because for me it's been a total game changer. I want everyone to benefit from it. In January, you'll find Magic Mind at Sprouts farmers markets across the country. You can get it there or go to magicmind.com/10minutemurder. Spell out the word 10. After you feel how much it improves your day-to-day and you're hooked, you can get a subscription with up to 50% off with my code 10minutemurder. Go to magicmind.com/10minutemurder. Only a few days before jury selection in his trial, Kip decided to plead guilty to both murder and attempted murder, and in late 1999, he received a sentence of more than 100 years without parole. He spoke briefly at his sentencing, apologizing for both killing his parents and shooting up the school. Almost a decade later, he appeared to change his mind about his guilty plea, claiming that his case should have been taken to trial, and his attorneys should have used an insanity defense due to his history of poor mental health. There is plenty of documented evidence that Kip had suffered from mental illness since he was a young boy. He had even been referred to a psychologist the year before the shootings and had been diagnosed with depression. Only 8 weeks later, his parents and the psychologist agreed that Kip had improved enough that he could stop receiving treatment, and when his Prozac prescription ran out, it was never refilled. Because of his history of mental illness, Kip requested a second trial, supported by 2 psychiatrists who testified that he'd been showing signs of schizophrenia at the time the crimes were committed. He had suffered from paranoid delusions for several years, beginning when he was around 12 years old. The delusions included an unwavering belief that the West Coast was about to be invaded by the Chinese, and that the United States government had placed a computer chip into his brain without his consent. Because of these delusions, he reported living a life in constant state of high alert. He also reported hearing 3 different voices in his head, which he labeled as Voice A, B, and C. Voice B was the voice who constantly insulted Kip and told him that his life wasn't worth living, whereas Voice A was the one who commanded him to carry out violent acts, such as fatally shooting his parents. Despite the impact that his delusions had on his quality of life, Kip didn't tell anybody about the voices until he was already in prison. He explained this as being due to a deep fear of being labeled as, quote, retarded or abnormal, or even being sent to an asylum. He tried to drown out the voices by carrying out intense physical activity or playing music as loud as he could, but it never really worked. Despite the psychiatrist's testimony, the judge denied Kip's request for another trial. Kip appealed the decision in both state and federal courts, but as of the time of this recording in 2024, he has not gone back to trial. In prison, Kip was officially diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and began receiving treatment for the condition. He started taking college classes, became a yoga instructor, and later began to work as an electrician. In 2020, Kip agreed to speak to a reporter for the American news site HuffPost, taking part in around 20 hours of interviews. He described how, after his antipsychotic medication began to take effect, he realized that so many of his core beliefs, such as having a chip implanted in his brain, were delusions. Without the constant paranoia taking over his life, he was left to try to come to terms with what he had done. Quote, "I did these things. I hurt these people. I killed my own parents, who I absolutely loved and who loved me and were good people. I shot and wounded completely innocent people that didn't deserve anything bad to happen to them at all. I killed 2 boys who were completely innocent, and I had to understand why I did this." That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. My name is Joe. I'm the host, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my podcast today. If you're on to the next one, don't let me stop you. Keep right on moving. Keep binging away. And if you're new to 10-Minute Murder, subscribe now so that you can more easily find the podcast when you come back to listen to it. Also, it helps you go back and listen to the back episodes as well. It's always going to be there when you open whatever place you like to listen to the podcast, whatever listening app. If you want to see what we talk about here on the podcast, see photos and videos of the people and the places, you can connect with me on social media. Go to 10minutemurder.com and the links to all of that will be right there for you. If you want to help the show grow, become more and more listened to by more people just like you and I, true crimers, share this podcast with your friends, family, anyone that you think could be into brief, bingeable true crime stories like 10-Minute Murder. If you have episode suggestions that you'd like for me to know about, questions about anything under the sun, you can email me, joe@10minutemurder.com. Thank you for listening to another podcast episode. I will see you on the next one.